Happy New Year, patient poetry peeps. Your part-time poet, Filet Mignon here, coming to you almost live from the studio of Medium Rare Poetry and bringing in the new year, even though today is the 7th of January, so I'm a little bit late. And 1,000 apologies for the delay in bringing you a YouTube video, but my poor old laptop was getting old and Microsoft didn't support Windows 10 anymore, and things were getting slower and slower, and it was much more difficult to record videos and get them up onto YouTube. And we, of course, being in Australia, were coming into summer and it was very hot, and it still is, hence the fan. However, I'm here and I was writing poetry, and today's poem was written on or about the 24th of November last year, which was a week or two after the US presidential election, which had a none too thrilling result, from my point of view anyway. So today's poem, Self-Inflicted Wound, is an allegory of what happened to the United States following the election, and using all the talent that Mr. Trump was bringing to bear as far as his new team of highly skilled professionals to run the country. Anyway, I hope you enjoy Self-Inflicted Wound. Self-Inflicted Wound by Filet Mignon. A once hale and hearty nation where democracy roamed free, in just one vote discovered they'd be doomed. With historical amnesia, they collapsed on bended knee, the outcome of a self-inflicted wound. The ambulance attended in the middle of the night to cart the crippled country into care. The Kremlin-cultured driver was one Leon Musk-o-Vite. He thought the patient didn't have a prayer. The medical facility was not your normal base, constructed from a concept of a plan. The regular infirmaries had all but been erased, insurance companies now the middleman. The patient was admitted as it was too big to fail, the doorman in sheep's clothing, Hannity. Like fetid feces clung from the administrator's tail, a worm like Robert F. Kennedy. In triage, first aid measures were to close the country's borders. You couldn't let infection sneak on in. Then wrap it up in tariffs under chief inspector's orders. The bleeding would be treated from within. Undocumented tissue was expunged, sent to the chiller, though pus was sometimes very hard to find. The exorcist in charge was crafty Stephen Fascist Miller, who held that justice certainly is blind. The shock was stabilized by way of constant anesthesia, delivered by the droning of the king. The population fortified with gratis analgesia, especially if they wore the red G-string. The brain was then transplanted with an artificial lump, intelligence conveyed from Tulsi's store. They couldn't have a populace much smarter than the Trump. The educators quickly shown the door. The patient's weak defences were adjudged in need of cleanse, so in came weekend warrior Hegseth. Unanimously qualified by all his fox and friends, decided the best option here was death. But Kristi Noem did intervene to save the sick foot slogs. Her native tribes were bound to disagree. Suggesting reconstruction came by shooting all the dogs. This treatment proved a very messy spree. The orange obstetrician, with this amateur assembly, were waiting to commence an operation. They gripped the moaning patient in a manner none too friendly, embarking on a tubular ligation. The problem was the bumbling fool did not possess a clue on how to hold a scalpel in his hand. His only doubtful talent was the staging of a coup, but nothing ever turned out as he'd planned. To deconstruct a country with his trademark dopey smirk on paper seemed a very simple ask. Coercing all his minions to conduct the dirty work while raking all the profits was his task. So getting down to business, his first surgical selection, removal of the basic right to vote. By swift elimination of all troublesome elections, he'd revel in an all-consuming bloat. Misogynistic medicos would subjugate the ladies, just like their righteous grandpas used to tell. Keep them poor and pregnant in a constant state of Hades, enmeshed within their master's woven spell. But women of the voting force well knew the implication. Primeval laws would jeopardize their health. And so, to all their menfolk, they withdrew their supplication, for population growth was clogged through stealth. These treatments soon were vetted by the new created Dodge, where government expenditure was curbed. Vivek Ramaswamy, lounging in his private lodge, saw waste and almost slop champagne, perturbed. He called a quick cessation to America's recovery. The clinic's progress lurched into arrhythmia. The team, all of a sudden, found the path to self-discovery and sent the pampered Pratt back home to India. So now they had a country that was just about undone by draining all at once its inner force. No labour was available to toil beneath the sun. The immigrants had done those jobs, of course. The tariffs had turned dollar stores to $100 dumps. Inflation in these shops the new war crime. The air was plain unbreathable and water wouldn't pump because the dams were full of nasty slime. The so-called mighty nation had now tumbled just like Rome, for arrogance will always lead downhill. A simple vote, though tainted, brought the roosting chickens home. No wonder that the nation was so ill. This tragic self-infliction saw the world ignore its pain. Contagion always called for isolation. The planet thrived without them, with no artificial brain, and sobered by this avarice flirtation. Eventually the sun broke through, the wheels began to wobble. The tyrant lost his weaving mental rudder. The egos were unbounded, and they all began to squabble, outmoded views developing a shudder. The populace had seen the light, the regime full of holes. The vacuum of fake power now had dropsy. America rose from the tomb, a rebirth of true souls, a lesson learned, avoiding full autopsy. Well, a sorry tale indeed, but nevertheless there might be a faint light of hope on the horizon if we use that good old Kamala Harris spirit and positivity with a oomph from Tim Walz. You never know. Naughty things that happened in the election may well be exposed, and we'll see what happens after that. There's more poems coming regarding that, I believe. Well, I know because I wrote them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the poem. Please like, share and subscribe. And I'm so happy that you've stayed with me. I've got 79 subscribers now, so I'm awfully excited. And I do thank you all most sincerely. And let's have some poetry together and have a bit of fun. Anyway, all the best, and I will bid you bye-bye for now.